So this is it. This is what all the kerfuffle over the past 24 hours has been about. This is the Google Nexus 7 tablet by Asus, which was announced at the Google I/O event last night at the rather shocking price of 159 of your UK pounds for one with 8 gigabytes of internal storage and 199 for one with 16 gigabytes of internal storage. And I've been lucky enough to get a brief hands-on with the device today, courtesy of our friends at Asus. Now, full disclosure, I should say up front that I've already placed my order for one of these as soon as Google made the announcement, because I thought the spec was pretty impressive, and I'm pleased to say that the actual device itself is also pretty impressive. When you see it, it first of all just looks like a normal Android tablet. It looks rather like the Samsung Galaxy Tab 7.7, I think. It's black, it's got that sort of widescreen shape, or in this case I should say tall and thin, because it kind of fits more naturally, I think, in the hands in the portrait orientation, although of course you can use it in landscape if you prefer. From the pictures that Google originally showed us last night, it looked like it was going to have quite big bezels around that screen, but actually when you see it in the flesh, the thing isn't too big, and they're actually quite a comfortable size for holding with your hands and your thumbs. It's not super lightweight, it's not too heavy. It weighs 340 grams, which is about half of what the new iPad weighs, a little bit more than that. It's sort of substantial in your hand. It's not too heavy. It's got a sort of dimpled back, which means it's quite nice. It's got a good grip to it. You don't sort of feel it's in danger of slipping out of your fingers while you're holding it, which is nice. Obviously, one of the big points of interest here is the screen, because Asus has crammed a 1280 by 800 screen into this 7-inch diagonal, which gives it a pretty high dot pitch. We're looking at 215 ppi. For comparison, the iPad is 264, so it's not quite up there with the Retina display, but it's pretty sharp. I mean, the old iPads, for comparison, were about 127, I think. So it's very sharp. If you want to see individual pixels, if you peer closely, you can see them, but it's pretty good. And unless you're actually holding it close up, it looks very, very sharp and smooth. It looks a lot better than many much more expensive tablets. It's also nice and bright. It definitely, you won't sort of squint to see it. And it's an IPS panel, so it's got lovely viewing angles. Tim Smalley from Asus promises me it's got a 178-degree viewing angle, though I'm not quite sure how you'd test that. I have to say the colours are a little bit subdued. It's not as sort of super vibrant as some other screens we've seen. At least that's how it appeared to me. We'll have to wait until we have a chance to sort of see it under controlled lighting to be certain, but it wasn't bowled over. And I also have to say the contrast ratio doesn't seem particularly special. When there's a black background on screen, you can very clearly see it's a lot brighter, a lot lighter than the black of the bezel. So it's not it's not super rich, solid, inky blacks like you might expect from a really premium screen, but it's still good. It's still nice to use. In terms of performance, it seems good. It's got a quad-core Tegra 3 in it. Web browsing was very smooth, and I had a chance to try running the SunSpider JavaScript benchmark, which on average took 1.7 seconds on this thing, which is slightly faster than the iPad, and it's quite a bit faster than the Samsung Galaxy Tab 2, which obviously competes at this sort of price, which averaged about 2.2 seconds to complete this benchmark. Also ran a few games, and everything seemed to be very smooth and slick. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to use the quadrant benchmark. For some reason, that couldn't connect to its server, which it needs. But generally speaking, performance seems very good. It certainly seems to be up there with sort of any tablet you could buy for maybe twice the price. In terms of battery life, obviously that's something that I wasn't able to test in a 10-minute play, but they tell me that it should be good for 9.5 hours of 720p video, and there's going to be a software upgrade that rolls out before it's released. So when you get it, it should already have the very latest version of software, which they're hoping will get that up to 11 hours. They're not making any promises, but they're expecting to see even better than 9.5 hours of video. Obviously, we'll have to do more tests to see how it survives on standby when you're web browsing and so forth. Another interesting thing about this device, obviously it comes with Jelly Bean, which is the new release of Android. It's brand spanking new. It is only 4.1. They've decided to call it, not 5, because it's not a huge advance on Ice Cream Sandwich. But one big change is something that Google's called Project Butter, which is a stupid name. But what it means is they've tried to make everything a bit faster, a bit smoother, a bit more responsive. And I think you can really feel that, actually. The sort of the hesitancy of scrolling and swiping, which I think we all kind of experienced from Android devices, that seems to be completely gone. I wasn't able to make it stutter or hiccup at all. I think there's absolutely no reason at all now to criticize the smoothness of Android versus iOS. And also Jelly Bean brings a few interesting new features. Perhaps revealingly, when you start up the device, the default screen you see now is your content library with books and movies and so forth, rather than a selection of apps, though obviously you can change that if you want to. Chrome is now the default browser in Android. I just had a very quick play with that, but I noticed one new trick which I like a lot, which is if you prod the screen to try and click a link, but there's actually 2 links within your prod area, as it were, if you've got fat fingers or very small text or both, then you get a little magnifying pane sort of pop up, so you can then easily click on which of the links it was you actually meant. Just a very thoughtful but very, very helpful little bit of usability there. There are some compromises, obviously, to hit the amazing price point. There's no rear-facing camera, and there's no microSD card slot. Asus say they haven't ruled out in the future making more devices like this, maybe not Google branded, who knows, but more devices in this kind of price range that will have those features. But for now, in order to deliver the experience that they wanted at the price they were trying to hit, they decided to exclude those things altogether. Obviously, they were quite keen to point out that with Google Play you can stream a lot of content, so you shouldn't need so much local storage. I'm not sure I'm persuaded by that yet, but you can, of course, as a sort of a halfway compromise, you can buy a fairly cheap adapter which will plug into the micro USB socket at the bottom, and then you can connect a USB flash drive, so you can expand the storage that way, although it's obviously not terrifically elegant. On the subject of that micro USB connector, just going around the outside, there's also a headphone connector at the bottom, which is positioned so that the cable doesn't trail across the screen and annoy you. Volume and power buttons on the right hand side. On the left hand side, interesting, there's a little 4-pin connector which they say is for an audio dock, and that's it in terms of connections. Very simple, very clean design. Now you're probably wondering when exactly it's actually going to hit the streets, because Google's been a little bit cagey. They've just been saying things like 2 to 3 weeks. The expectation is, I'm told, that these things will start being shipped from the manufacturers around the 20th of July, and they should be on the shelves everywhere, including PC World, Currys and Tesco, interestingly, by the 27th of July, if not before. It's looking like that will be the 16 gig version. The 8 gig version may only be available to buy from Google Play, which is interesting. It sort of suggests that even the manufacturer isn't 100% certain that 8 gigabytes is enough for a mainstream device anymore. So that's it, basically. That's what I was able to glean from a few minutes playing with the machine and a bit of a chat to Asus's product managers and so forth. And I do feel very positive about it. It's definitely not, a direct rival to the iPad, but we never imagined it really would be at this price. And personally, I wouldn't blame you if you do what I did and go and place an order right now. But of course, the most sensible thing to do is hang on just a couple of weeks, because we'll get one in and we'll do a full review and we'll be able to really put it through its paces, and then we'll see exactly what's what.